Hey there, my name is Haya bin Shabbat. Do you ever have one of those events in your life that you know defines you and becomes a literal moment in life that propels you in one direction or another? Well, when I was 3 years old, I grew up in small town Texas, and I had gone with a friend to visit their horses. And we were checking on their horses, feeding the horses, and as fate would have it, during feeding time, I got caught between a little rift between two horses, and I got kicked in the head by one of the horses. So there was blood everywhere, cracked open my skull. The neighbors had to race me to the hospital, like tiny small town hospital. Of course, this was back in the days before cell phones. And when the neighbors ran to call my parents, and they said, I don't know what happened, but she got hurt, she got kicked, and we're taking her to the hospital, meet us there. My parents told me later they had no idea if I was dead or alive, but when they got to the hospital and they walked through the sliding glass doors, they could hear me screaming in emergency, and that's how they knew that I was alive. But when they took me to surgery, this is the one thing I remember. You know, there are those things that happen in your life that when they're traumatic enough, you can remember back at a very early age. So I actually remember a couple of these scenes from this event. I remember sitting on the lap of my neighbor, my neighbor's mom, in the passenger seat of her white SUV, driving down the highway, flying down the highway to the hospital with actually the ambulance following along behind us because my neighbor didn't want to stop and wait for them to get there. So the ambulance actually followed us to the hospital, and then I remember when they got me there, they swooped me into the emergency room and they laid me down on the operating table and they put this massive, heavy, bright blue lead blanket all over my body from my neck down to my toes to keep me from flapping all around while they were doing surgery on my skull. And from that moment forward, I have literally hated limitations of any type. I hated not being able to move my hands or kick my feet. I wanted to flail and flap all about. And this lead blanket was so heavy that it kept me from moving. And I remember from that point, it's not like I necessarily became claustrophobic, but I hated being constricted or limited in any way. And my life has been like that from that point forward. I wanted to know what it's like to live a life beyond limits. So I grew up and I went the traditional path of, go to college, get really good grades, pad your resume, get a good job, go to graduate school, climb the corporate ladder, and really sit back and wait for the American dream to manifest in your life. Well, guess what? I was a ripe old age of about 23, 24, 25, waiting for it, do my best to climb the corporate ladder. I was in the young professional programs. I was, the up-and-comers and all of the programs and the extracurricular activities. I have a background in corporate banking. And when I was in graduate school, I was actually in the MBA program when I was 25 years old. Actually just about to turn 25. I remember at the time thinking I was having a quarter-life crisis. And I thought, there has got to be more than this. There has got to be a better way. I would drive or ride actually for an hour in a train from where I lived in far north Dallas into downtown Dallas. Then I would ride the train for an hour back. I would be studying for graduate school during that 2-hour daily commute. And I just started to pray out the window. There's got to be a better way. Please, God, show me a better way. And I went from corporate America into business for myself. I went into, had a very successful sales business, and then I started coaching other women that were in small businesses or aspiring entrepreneurs, and I built a very successful thing. God allowed me to be very successful in business, and I started coaching other men and women on how to build a business of their own. And what I began to realize is this common thread that so many people want to pursue the American dream. They want to do more in life. They want to rise above mediocrity. They want to break free from this generational programming that we're all living by, but we don't know how. We don't have the skills. We don't have the life skills, the time management, the emotional management, the money management, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills, the leadership skills, the technical skills. We're missing so many things. And you know what? We cannot give away what we don't have. We can't teach what we don't know. And as I started working with thousands upon thousands of professional men and women or aspiring entrepreneurs across the last 10, 20 years, I began to realize that this was a common theme. It was a common thread. And then, as fate would have it, I started even working with college kids. I was invited to teach a couple of classes. I was living and working in Australia for a while. I was teaching at a college there in Australia. And what they asked me to come and teach was life skills. To teach these millennials that were graduating and ready to conquer the world. They wanted to go out and change the world, but they didn't know how to change a tire. You know, we want to be able to feed the hungry and to be able to solve the world's hunger problems, but we don't even know how to manage our own bank account. So how is it that we are raising generation after generation after generation of dreamers and visionaries, but we're missing the core skills to actually be able to make our dreams come true? Don't you think it's interesting that the educational industry is the only industry that survived the last 200 years without any innovation, without any evolution at all? How can it be? Every other industry on the planet is forced to either innovate or die. Every industry, all the way from trains, planes, automobiles, everything, high tech, the internet, every other industry has been forced to keep up or die. And yet in education, we are still teaching students today the way that our grandparents were taught. Guess what? It didn't even work 200 years ago. It didn't work 100 years ago. So why are we still doing it today? Do you know that the world's top companies today, like Facebook, Amazon, Google, would you believe they're no longer even requiring college degrees to work there? Do you know what they do instead? They interview each applicant and they say, show me how you can innovate. Show me how you can be creative. Show me how you are a problem solver. And because they're looking at the critical thinking skills that are required in today's world, ever since, the advent of the internet and Google and Siri, they don't need to know long math. You can look and solve a problem quickly, but what they do need to know how to do is to think outside the box. They need to know how to think creatively. They need to know how to be solutions oriented. They need to know how to work as a team. They need to know how to lead, but to be humble at the same time. They need to learn how to check their ego out the door without being a doormat. And all of these skills, when you put them together, where are they taught? Well, our parents think school's going to teach them, and schools, well, I don't know what schools think anymore. They're assuming that they're going to learn them somewhere else because there is no formal curriculum that teaches these skills. Now, when I had a son, and he's now 11 years old, and I started looking into schooling options for him, and I began to realize, wow, this is a big problem. And if I was not willing to do something about the current education system, then I would be forced to just be a consumer. I would be forced to just put up with the options that we have in front of us. And quite frankly, that is not something that I was willing to do. So what do? Well, we got to do something about it ourselves. I've actually been in the personal and professional development world now for the past 16, 17 years. I lose track now. And I often think, what if we could teach our kids those skills that we need to succeed in today's world? What if we could teach those to our kids when they're in elementary school? And then they would be able to build on these skill sets all the way through their schooling, junior high, high school, college, university, and beyond. And then they would go out into the world thinking these things as their baseline. What a different world that would be. And we know for sure that if we want to change the world for tomorrow, we have to start today. And what that means is that we have to prepare today's students to become tomorrow's leaders. And millennial leadership has got to look different than where we are holding right now. I refuse to believe that we have to settle for a world that looks like it does today. And I know there are a lot of us who believe this same way. In the personal and professional industry, there are authors and keynote speakers and A-listers and Fortune 500, 100 company founders and CEOs. They talk all the time about the fact that education has to change. And we're always looking around saying, okay, who's going to do it? How are we going to start? It's too big of a monster to conquer. And I believe that it's not. I believe that we really can do it. But rather than going and fighting against the government and fighting against the system, what if we just create a new system? What if we bring together all of these like-minded peoples, these visionaries, these world changers, these perpetual dreamers, and these pioneers? What if we bring everybody together and we create a system that actually prepares today's children to become tomorrow's leaders. That's what life is all about. That's what we are going to do right here, right now. It begins today. It starts with me, and it starts with you. Are you in? I'd love to have you join us. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. I believe it's going to take a whole army to change this world, and I know that we can do it. So I'm ready, I'm waiting, and I'm excited to have you with us. Let's get started.